Hello, everyone. Happy Sunday evening. It's not happy for me, Dwayne, but we're breaking down everything that is going on right now, just days before the NFL free agency begins, and we've got a lot of news to go through. We've got DK Metcalf. We're going to talk a little Geno Smith. We've got Davante Adams. How you doing?
I'm doing good. Like, this is flashbacks to actually in the season. It's around this time, usually each Sunday night. Ian and I are kicking off the recap of all the games from Sunday. Kendall, you've been watching Red Zone all day, but today, no, I wasn't watching Red Zone all day. But yeah, we still have a lot of great football news, and I get to hang out with you, even though I know it's a little bit sad as
we
a
get
Seahawks
to hang
fan
out
right now.
Depressing, sad, whatever. I don't know if this is how you feel, no offense, as a Cowboys fan with all the texts and the shots fired, but it's not a fun time. I don't know what's going on with the Seahawks, but we can start there. Let's just dive right in and start with our recap. Appreciate everyone hanging out with us too. If you've got any questions, please just drop them in the chat and we're going to try and answer as many as we can get to here. Let's go with DK Metcalf, because this was one I said on the air today. We were on Sirius XM today, Dwayne, and I said, well, there's this part of the Seahawks that don't have to trade him. Like, really, they didn't have to do this. They first asked for a first and a third, and then we got the news that the asking price was going down. Now they traded DK Metcalf to the Steelers in exchange for a second-round pick in this year's NFL draft, and then he signed a 5-year, $150 million contract just minutes later, per Tom Pelissero. So he goes over to the Pittsburgh Steelers after requesting a trade. Last season, 66 of 108 targets, 992 yards, 5 touchdowns over 15 regular season games. And on the surface, Dwayne, how do you feel about this from a fantasy perspective? Because right now, I want to say I don't love it. Okay, pair him with George Pickens, and okay, but we really have no answer yet on their quarterback. It could be Russell Wilson, which would be a little bit funny. It could be Justin Fields, could be Sam Darnold. There's still so much that we don't know, so it feels hard to grade this.
Yeah, it is tough to grade, but we do know some things are not going to change, right? We've got Arthur Smith there as the offensive coordinator. This is a guy that we know has been very willing to lean into like the heavy run game, using all these different personnel sets, rotating even as the best players off the field. So always a maddening experience with Arthur Smith. With most coaches, we typically lean into, okay, they're going to get their best players on the field. Now, sometimes, offenses are too crowded and not everyone can eat every weekend, but Arthur Smith doesn't care. Like, he could literally have one superstar and he'll be like, we're going to play like 70% of the plays. Like that, that just feels about right. So that's a challenge, right, for Metcalf. I would be curious to see if they do something with Pickens now, right? Are they going to keep him, or they decide they may want to do something with him? Because, it just hasn't been like, it wasn't, I don't want to say it was bad last year, but it started off rough, right? And then it got a little bit better once Russ got under center. So I do wonder, but if you have DK Metcalf and you have George Pickens there, and say somehow the starting quarterback is Justin Fields, who turns a lot of dropbacks into scrambles. So even if you do get a pass play, it might still turn into a run play. And we know how like streaky Justin Fields can be. Man, it's going to be really tough to want DK Metcalf or George Pickens on your roster. We haven't really seen a passing offense. At least I'm just thinking off the top of my head, Kendall. In the history of Arthur Smith, I can't remember a passing offense where we liked 2 of the weapons in the passing game.
No, that's the worst part. And that's why I'm curious to see if it is Russell Wilson, because there was bad blood when Russell Wilson left the Seahawks. So I don't know if, maybe DK knows something that we don't. We've seen that there are reports like, they are still in the mix for Sam Darnold, which we can talk about here in a second. And Justin Fields, I don't mind Justin Fields, because while we saw glimpses of him last season, and he actually, played some of his best football that we've seen. So that's, beside the DK Metcalf point, that's more of Justin Fields as a fantasy asset. But I would be curious to see how he could do with a full season under his belt, with, not having to look, over his shoulder and say, well, Russell Wilson's there. They told me he was going to be the starter once he got healthy, and that's what they did. So yeah, for DK Metcalf, I don't have a great, it just doesn't feel good right now from a fantasy perspective, but I still want to wait and see who their quarterback is. And you're right, maybe they do still deal George Pickens. It feels like maybe that could still be in the cards. There were all those rumors going around saying, that he hasn't kind of fit in. It's a culture thing with him, unfortunately. So I feel like that could still be on the table. But yeah, DK Metcalf on the move. I thought he wanted somewhere warm, Dwayne. I thought he wanted warm weather, and he got a lot of money, but I thought he wanted warm weather. I pegged him to go to the Chargers.
Well, when you look at the way DK Metcalf plays, I think he's a good fit for like the Steelers. I mean, you're talking about one of the toughest receivers in the league. The dude's an absolute beast as far as like how well he keeps himself in shape. I think the big challenge here is just ultimately, do we have the quarterback? Like you mentioned, Justin Fields, like if he is the starting quarterback, like Justin Fields will be a sneaky guy that could end up being like a top 8 fantasy quarterback just because he runs a lot. Now we have 2 good weapons if they keep George Pickens, but it would be really bad for Metcalf and Pickens. I think you would have a real hard time in fantasy knowing when to start either one of those players. Right now, DK Metcalf's going wide receiver 24 over on Underdog. I would say that this move pushes him down into like 30, the 30-ish range. Like just looking at guys behind him, I'm for sure taking Davante Adams over him. We still got to wait some news around Rashee Rice, but I'd probably still go ahead and take Rashee Rice over DK Metcalf. Chris Olave, I probably would go ahead and take over DK Metcalf at this point, now that we know what we know about Derek Carr. Jalen Waddle, like at least I know Miami can be an explosive offense that could want to throw the ball a little bit more. So I think he starts falling down right into that range. And then you've got George Pickens sitting there at wide receiver 33. Like he's probably moving to like wide receiver 4 territory. And what's interesting, Kendall, I really do believe like either one of these wide receivers, if you put them in the right position with a really good quarterback that wanted, and they on an offense that wanted to throw the ball quite a bit, like they're both good players. They're both maybe potentially like wide receiver 1s in fantasy football. We haven't ever seen it. They've been more like flirting with the wide receiver 2, or wide receiver 2s flirting with the wide receiver 1 range. But it wouldn't surprise me if either one of them were able to have a wide receiver 1 season in a good spot. This is not a good spot. Now, if we do have a situation where Sam Darnold signs, that does help them. Because then if the Steelers do suddenly decide, hey, they're going to throw the ball more than what maybe we're predicting them to, and Sam Darnold carries over some of the things that we saw from him in Minnesota. We know that he does like to push the ball down the field, Kendall. Like he and Jordan Addison, they had a great connection. Darnold may make a lot of mistakes, but he's not afraid to push the ball down the field, which would work great for both of these players, so it would fit their archetype. But it would still be a question of, will Arthur Smith be willing to throw the ball enough? So Sam Darnold would be the best news for them, I think, as a duo of them both having a chance to succeed, but it would still be hard to be confident.
Who would have thought that just a couple years now, and we're still talking about Arthur Smith ruining our fantasy teams? It's it's absolutely incredible that we can't get away from Arthur Smith. I think it's interesting where he's going right now in drafts, and if people are going to push him up again, I still agree with you that a George Pickens trade could be on the table here for the Steelers, especially if it's just going to be a little bit toxic. Because Dwayne, that's what I was thinking about with the Seahawks. Is when I said, okay, they don't have to trade DK Metcalf, but how toxic could that relationship get? You don't want that in your locker room. So that's one of the things where when he was now just traded, I said, okay, well, it was obvious that he wanted out and they were just going to allow him to do that. So DK Metcalf, when we talked on that podcast just about a month ago, you said he eclipsed a 22% target share only twice in his career, 2021, 2022. Monster against man coverage. That's something that everyone knows. 31% targets per route run the last 3 years. Kind of gets lost in the mix with the zone coverage, right? 19%. And like you said, he's going to be 27 years old. Are you switching over to Pickens? So are you kind of out on Pickens with this
I think
move? Does that drop him down?
I think they could both cancel each other out. They're the same thing. Like George Pickens, all the things we just said about DK Metcalf, that's really the profile of Pickens. That's what makes me wonder, are they going to move him, right? Because it feels like
I didn't know if they weren't going to send him with. I thought we were going to get a tweet just minutes later saying that they're sending Pickens for Metcalf. To be totally
they're very
honest.
similar players. Now it doesn't mean you can't like go out and win. Like imagine the run blocking if they're both bought in. Like I can't really figure out any cornerbacks that could probably handle the run blocking if those two guys really decided that they wanted to, just get after it. So we'll see what they do, but. Like, let's say if they did move Pickens, Kendall, I would say DK then turns into that low end wide receiver 2 that could end up giving us a wide receiver 1 season. Okay. But I think right now you got to drop him down to like mid range wide receiver 3. Pickens probably high end wide receiver 4. The talent's there, guys. There's no debating the talent. But you just have to understand the dominoes that would have to fall for it to really work out. Arthur Smith would have to change his mind, decide he wants to throw the ball more. Mike Tomlin would then have to say, okay, we're willing to do that. Well, that means that they also would have gone out and signed a quarterback back like Sam Darnold. I did that before the show. I did this to Ian the other day.
You freaked me out. You said Bradford. And I said, what are you talking about?
It's not good. It's not a good sign for Sam Darnold. I don't know why it's stuck in my head, but like if they get Darnold, and then they suddenly surprise us on all these other fronts, like you could end up being wrong for passing on them in drafts if you thought if they were priced too high. But ultimately, it's going to be tough with both of them vying for targets the way that the Steelers offense is set up today.
Let's go over to the Seahawks and talk about. I tweeted, JSN to the moon, but it was that girl that was crying and dancing at the same time because it's like, yeah, there's no one else there. So I mean, really, who else could they go to for fantasy football purposes? Geno Smith on the move. If anyone, yeah, I don't know how you could have, but just in case anyone missed that, he went to the Las Vegas Raiders, gave up a 2025 third round pick, which is 92nd overall, and that was 6 years with Geno. I can't believe it was, but it was 6 years in Seattle. So he is now with Pete Carroll over there in the Raiders. And my thing, Dwain, is that I want to believe for everything. Sure, they go out and get Matthew Golden. They go out and get some wide receivers. They say they're not rebuilding. They say they're retooling in some of their recent quotes. But to me, Dwain, even if they're linked to Sam Darnold and we say to ourselves, okay, he's not going to be cheap, first of all, to sign. And to me, Dwain, when I look at that offensive line that we've talked about for years, no one to me can succeed there until they get that interior offensive line fixed. And until they do that, Sam Darnold, whoever it's going to be, Aaron Rodgers is linked to them now. It's a little bit scary. So JSN is the only one left with Tyler Lockett's release. You've got DK Metcalf gone now. We can talk Kenneth Walker. We can talk whoever else. But it's just, it's kind of interesting. And again, it's hard to grade because we don't know where their future lies.
I just want to shout out Dynasty Dave in the chat for having my back. He says, I've never seen Darnold and Bradford in the same room together. Just saying. Thank you. I do appreciate that. Dynasty Dave. Respect. They have not been seen together. So maybe they are the same person and I'm onto something here. Looking at, JSN Kendall, it's, kind of ironic that really when he broke out last year was when DK Metcalf got hurt, right? And he had missed that stint of games. So starting in week 8, we had a 28% target share, 38% target share, 35% target share. The dude's utilization score was a 9.9, 9.2 in weeks 9 and 11. Ultimately, Metcalf came back after that, but he really did, hold on to a lot of that role. He had a couple of weeks where he's a little bit more down, but still week 15 had a 40% target share. Then he had 29 and 29 in week 16 and 17. So JSN, a 27% target share from week 8 on. So he's obviously the centerpiece to their passing game. When you go back and you really watch it and you look at the way they use JSN, like they were getting more involved around the line of scrimmage. He was making more plays after the catch, but also, man, Geno was dropping absolute dimes to JSN when he just had a very small amount of separation. So like Geno had a lot of trust in JSN. So who the quarterback is going to be really is going to matter because it's not like JSN is out here completely shaking people in their boots. Like he is a good wide receiver, but I don't know that he's this alpha wide receiver. I think schematic things can help him out quite a bit. I really do like him. So I'm not saying I don't like him. He's probably in line for a 25 to 30% target share, but to your point, Kendall, who's it going to be from? And can it be someone that can help unlock some of the nice throws that he did get from Geno down the field when Geno would just see it immediately, right? And it was those anticipation throws with JSN that led to some big plays, including some touchdowns. So those are the sort of things we're going to need to see from the new quarterback. If it's Darnold, he can absolutely make those throws. I do find the Seahawks comments really puzzling that they're not rebuilding, they're retooling. When you get rid of your quarterback, and you trade away a fairly young star wide receiver like DK Metcalf, it's not like DK was 31 years old. This is a young player. So I think that's pretty interesting that they're using that phrasing. And if they do go out and sign Darnold, it's like, okay, he's a little bit younger, but he really struggled with pressure last year. If you look at Geno, he had a ton of pressure, like the most pressure if you look at throws of 2.5 seconds or under, no quarterback was pressured more in those situations. And that's not really where Darnold shines. So I think it's going to be interesting. Darnold would be the best case, I think, for JSN right now, but I'm not so sure that it would go as well as what we saw in Minnesota.
Yeah, from a fantasy perspective, Sam Darnold would be the best, but I don't know, Dwayne, what the plan is. I guess that's been the more, like you said, puzzling thing with the Seahawks. It's like, okay, if you're not tearing it all the way down and you're going to go sign Sam Darnold, who's going to be 28 years old this summer. Like, yes, he's young and he could get you something, but he's going to be expensive. He's going to be expensive. And it looks like, Geno Smith wasn't willing to play. He had 1 year left on that deal. So it kind of probably turned out that he just wanted to get paid. Pete Carroll stepped in and said, yeah, we're going to pay you, because he had 1 year, $31 million left on his contract. So he might've just said, I'm not going to play on that. I want a new deal. And the Seahawks weren't willing to give him what he wanted there. But Yeah, for me, I don't know. Put Sam Darnold back there, and he'll be running for his life. Like they just have to do something different here, Dwayne. When it comes to their offensive line, like they need to get better at identifying talent. They need to get better at just being able to do that through the draft, through free agency. It feels like a band-aid across this huge hole that's been in the organization for a really long time. It's been their Achilles heel. So that's what makes me nervous about Sam Darnold. You put him back there, and the pressure, like you said, he's not good under pressure, and that's what he's going to get. We can talk about anything else with the offensive line, but it makes me nervous. I thought they would go out maybe and sign Justin Fields to a 1-year, $10 million deal. If they want a bridge quarterback, not that would be good for fantasy football, but if they wanted a bridge quarterback to try and get to next year, because this quarterback class coming in, I can't see them unless they really put it all together and try and go and get Cam Ward, Shedeur Sanders. Those are the clear top 2 in the draft this year. Or they go and get, I don't know, a Jackson Dart.
If they're eyeing Jackson Dart or something like that.
A project, like I don't know, Dwayne. So that's my thing is like, if you're signing Sam Darnold, first of all, he's going to be expensive and he's going to be there for a while.
I'm with you. I don't know for sure what's going to happen. It's kind of confusing. It's hard to follow like the breadcrumbs on this one, but I would say I'm with you. Darnold would be the best case for JSN. With Clint Kubiak there as the new offensive coordinator, it's going to be mostly 2 wide receiver sets. So that could be the other thing they're thinking. Kendall's, we're not going to run 3 wide that much. We know we have 1 wide receiver in JSN. We feel that we can go out and add a second wide receiver either in the draft or maybe through free agency that we feel good about given the scheme that we're going to run. So I think that could also be playing a part here as to how they decided they wanted to manage their cap, right? And the money that they've got available based on the scheme that they want to run, at least for this year. Who knows if it goes beyond that? Kendall, I hope it does. I hope that it's a surprise good year for your Seahawks.
Dwayne, I'll come on here and apologize straight up if it is. I don't know the plan. If they obviously have a plan, but it's just not obvious to us what that plan is. So
AJ Barner. Is AJ Barner suddenly a sleeper, Kendall?
Stop.
He was nice in some spots.
Would you stop? I can't. Is this what my life's going to be for the next couple months?
Find a silver lining.
Okay, let's go get AJ Barr. They'll go get Matthew Golden or Teteroa McMillan. I don't know, but it doesn't help. It doesn't feel good. Last part on the JSN talk here, Dwayne. Right now, I'm only using underdog, so you all know watching this. It depends on where you're going to be drafting this season, and it's really early. We're having this conversation on March 9th, but on underdog, wide receivers are pushed up a little bit. JSN going off the board right now, wide receiver 14. Does that feel about? It feels like that's going to be steady, even depending on the quarterback conversation. He's going after guys like T. Higgins, Tyreek Hill, Ladd McConkey, AJ Brown, and then the guys going after JSN, Terry McLaurin, Garrett Wilson, DJ Moore.
Yeah, I think the range is about right. If they did sign Sam Darnold, I think he would pass T. Higgins. He would probably pass Tyreek Hill, maybe even Ladd McConkey, depending on who the Chargers add. The Chargers add another wide receiver, that could push Ladd down a little bit. And then all of a sudden you have those 2 guys kind of switching spots on the draft board. But I would say, right now, high-end wide receiver 2, given what he did last year. If they did sign Justin Fields, he would drop. I think Justin Fields would be the one scenario where you're like, okay, they're going to run the ball more. We know Clint Kubiak wants to run the ball anyway. We know JSN's still the primary target, but there's enough risk with the quarterback that I think you could see him slide a few spots. But it's going to be hard for him to go too far because you start running into names like DJ Moore. People are probably still going to draft JSN over DJ Moore. You're going to get to Mike Evans is sitting here at wide receiver 19. That's just, I don't know what we're doing. I know the guy's older, but Mike Evans should be going higher than DJ Moore and Garrett Wilson, some of these other guys. I don't think there's room for him to fall too far, even if it's Justin Fields at quarterback, but I do think he would slip some.
Okay. Let's go over to and kind of round things out with the last piece of news from today that just happened was Davante Adams. Davante Adams going to the Los Angeles Rams, Dwayne. This was a good one. I didn't know if he was going to go to the Chargers. I don't know why I keep thinking about the Chargers, but they need some help over there. But the Rams did announce that they were able to go and get Davante Adams. It looks like he is signing a 2-year, $46 million contract, $26 million in guaranteed money. And I know that there's a lot to talk about with this, but it kind of just means we knew that they were moving on from Cooper Kupp. This solidifies it. If anyone was thinking that Cooper Kupp might just for whatever reason stay there, it's not going to happen. And I was curious, Dwayne, if Davante Adams was going to wait and go where Aaron Rodgers went, his BFF, he was targeted 112 times last season, which was the 3rd most in the NFL. But as you and I talked about before, he was not washed last season to end the 2024 season. Once he went to the Jets, even with Aaron Rodgers, he actually looked pretty good.
Look, Davante Adams to close out the year. Well, not even close out the year. Once he got to the Jets, it basically took 1 week of acclimation for him. And despite having to play across from another really good wide receiver in Garrett Wilson, I still contend Garrett Wilson is a good player. I know it hasn't all come together for him, but Davante Adams, despite being an older player, came in and had a 30% target share with the Jets. So, like, we know the guy can still play. It's very interesting to see the Rams, Kendall, get in on an older player like Adams, and that they're moving on from a player like Cooper Kupp that knows their offense. Maybe a real not so subtle signal there that they really do see Cooper Kupp as washed, because they're willing to bring on an older wide receiver and they're willing to move on from Cooper Kupp. So, I mean, I feel like that's really telling about what the Rams think about Cooper Kupp's skill set at this point. So you guys can file that away for what you think it's worth. Ultimately, they're probably going to have to release Cooper Kupp, and we'll just see where he lands, if it's anywhere worth us talking about for fantasy football. But it's very clear, like, some football people think that Cooper Kupp is done, and they're in on Davante Adams. So the next big question here, Kendall, like, obviously we have the stock of Davante Adams himself.
Yep.
I think you're looking at him as a wide receiver too. He's going to have to battle Puka Nacua, but it's the question around Nacua. Like, how much do we worry about this with Puka Nacua? We just saw what Davante Adams was able to do to Garrett Wilson, who is a very good young wide receiver in his own right. So Puka Nacua is the wide receiver 4 off the board right now in fantasy on Underdog. He is the number 6 pick, almost number 7 pick. So a really high pick going on Puka. I could see Puka sliding below Nico Collins. I could see him falling below Amon-Ra St. Brown. And because the hype train is full steam ahead, maybe even as far as below Brian Thomas Jr. Like, we'll see where people ultimately go with this. It's also fully in the range of outcomes that, like, look, you can just have both of these guys be really good. I mean, we did see games where Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp both ate Kendall. They're one of those duos where we could see 60 to 70% of the targets go through just 2 guys. And if that happens, then, like, both guys actually really can be fine. Where it starts to become problematic is if one week one guy gets 35 or 40 and the other guy only gets 20, right? Things like that, then that can lead to more of a bumpy road. And of course, there are going to be games like that along the way. The question is if more often than not, can they both really be getting it done? So I think this does hurt Puka Nacua. I don't think it's a death sentence or anything for Puka Nacua. Obviously, the landing spot for Davante Adams, he's going to play in a dome. He gets to play with a good quarterback in Stafford, but he has a lot of target competition from a very young player in Puka Nacua.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up, where he's going in drafts right now, because I do think you're drafting him wide receiver 4, going off at the board at 7. And I agree with you. I would even say Malik Neighbors, like, put him. You could see some people say, I want a little bit more Malik Neighbors than Puka Nacua. That might be going a little bit too far.
I think the Giants would have to get a quarterback everybody likes, but if they did,
you don't like Aaron Rodgers? That's their guy.
If that happens, then I think people might. I think people might. I think you're right. I think so. The quarterback domino will be the deciding factor on Malik Neighbors probably versus like Puka, if it came to that. But it'll be interesting to see, like, how much people push him down.
I thought it was interesting. Jordan Rodriguez, who does a great job with The Athletic covering the loss. She's amazing and so cool. And shout out to, if you're not following Jordan Rodriguez on Twitter and everywhere, you have to go and do it. But she did tweet out today that Sean McVay, I guess the quote was, led a pretty aggressive charge at Davante Adams over the last couple of days. So I also think that comes into consideration. But overall, how he fits in this offense is, once the Rams decided that it was going to be Puka Nacua that they were going to go through, kind of being aggressive in their pursuit of players who could kind of complement him as a young superstar wide receiver is what they wanted to do. They extended Atwell as well. I wasn't, sure if they were going to do that this offseason, but it looks like it was part of this 2-step process where they say, okay, Atwell, and then we're going to go with Davante Adams, and everyone else can kind of just, sorry. I think I saw a comment in here about Whittington earlier. Yeah, sorry, that's not going to happen.
What's funny is, like, the two wide receiver pairings we've talked about, right? We talked about Pickens and Metcalf really being like the same kind of player. Like, Davante Adams can still win on the outside, so can Puka, but they're both best, like, in the intermediate ranges, right? If you look at Davante Adams' average depth of target last year, 8.7. Puka Nacua's was 8.3. I think they'll still give Puka most of, like, the little, the cheap throws around the line of scrimmage where basically he turns into a running back. Puka Nacua is really good at that sort of thing. But it is interesting just overall, like, as a fit for the Rams offense, like, they're kind of the same. Like, so
yeah.
Can Tutu Atwell, like, suddenly develop into this explosive guy that can take the lid off the defense? I mean, they don't even hardly put Tutu Atwell on the field when they have 2 other wide receivers that are really healthy. So I do find that kind of interesting. I feel like, look, I like Davante Adams. I think he's going to be fine for fantasy. But I feel like what the Rams needed was really a wide receiver that can take the top off the defense and stay out there for all the plays. Versus because with Tutu, he's really more of a limited player because of his size. He can't stay out there for the run blocking and things like that. It's been productive when given his opportunities, but I do find it interesting that what is just far as the Rams are concerned and what this means for like their future next year, like they still don't have an ultimate playmaker that can just get things done down the field.
It kind of reminded me of when I was looking at the trio, right, that we just talked about. It kind of reminded me of the Rams when they went to the Super Bowl against the Bengals in whatever that was, 2022. Like you had Cooper Kupp as the focal point. Now it's Nakua. You had Odell Beckham Jr., who you can argue Davante Adams is better now, and then you had Van Jefferson, and that was kind of their trio that they went with. And then you add in a better run game this season. You've got Kyron Williams there. That's just adding a better run game for this Rams team. So I think the impact is going to be felt. Like I can see it. I can see it being a good move for them, just in an overall NFL kind of landscape type look. And it's tough when your team is tanking here, Dwain, in a division that was open last year. Like that division was open, and you saw a little bit of a fall off from the San Francisco 49ers. And now I'm just kind of sad, and I'm a little bit jealous. I'm not gonna lie.
I think the other winner here, Stafford. Like I think there's this potential run out that could happen. And we talk about this with these McVay style offenses, with the Shanahan offenses, that sometimes these quarterbacks just come through with a hyper efficient year. And we've seen it like back in the day with Matt Ryan, even going back further, Matt Schaub way back in the day. You have some of these guys that just have these weird years where they throw a lot of touchdowns, and the offense is just well run. We've seen it with Jared Goff. Even last year he had a good year like that in the Lions. Just some of these pocket passers that don't do much on the ground that we kind of forget about, but you get enough weapons around them, you get them in the right scheme. Obviously, we know McVay's a guy that can dial up all the right plays at the right time. That could be something, for Matt Stafford. Like, we're not going to move Stafford up into the top 12 or anything. No. Like if you're playing in best ball, especially, right, as your QB2, if you're trying to plan things out, once we have a schedule, no buys and all that kind of all those sort of things. Like I can see some situations where we know Stafford can come through with at least with a big game, Kendall. Yeah. We know he's still capable of having a 350-yard day, and you could have Adams and potentially Puka Nacua going off in a game like that. So I do think Stafford gets a bump, with this news, because we at least know that he has two good wide receivers.
Yeah, shout out to John here in the chat. And again, if you guys have any questions, throw them in and we'll try and answer as many as we can. But he said Adams with Stafford is nasty, and I agree. I just think it's good. You've got a quarterback upgrade, and it's good for Stafford, who was a part of trade rumors, for a little bit, saying like maybe he was going to be on the move, and he said he wanted to play in 2025. There were also, retirement. We always talked about retirement there with Stafford, but he's back, and I don't know, Dwain, how many times are you going to stack Matthew Stafford in underdog drafts? Because he's gonna go cheap. You get one of Puka Nacua, you get one of Davante Adams, Kyron Williams, obviously still in the mix there. I think the limit doesn't.
I think the lesson we've learned, like in those sort of contests, is you should be drafting a bunch of teams, and you should be creating all different kind of stacks. So I will definitely have some Matthew Stafford stacks. The problem for you now was going to be there are two good wide receivers you can be drafting, and if you don't have both of them, say you just get one of them, the other Matthew Stafford drafter is also going to be thinking about taking him as their QB2 later in the draft. So, we've got best ball drafts already going, Kendall. Like I haven't gotten into the full swing of it yet.
What?
But I can already feel it now. I can feel it now. I'm trying to set up my round 13 Stafford to Davante Adams and the Puka Nacua drafter, who has already drafted two quarterbacks, drafts their third quarterback. And I just turned my phone off for the rest of my run.
You can picture it getting sniped already. He's going right now, pick 165. So right towards the end of round 14, I can picture it, just reaching for him in round, 10, 11. That seems about right. Just to say, no, I want Matthew Stafford on my team. So Dwain, before we wrap things up here, with all the news that we've got today, I kind of, just want to know fantasy lens, what you're the most excited about. Is it Davante Adams? Is it DK Metcalf? What should people watch out for? Just your full big takeaway from today.
Yeah, I think the biggest winner of all this news today, like right now, as we stand right now, probably is Adams, because he at least is playing with a good quarterback, right? We know he's going to be with Stafford. He could have landed somewhere where he didn't have a quarterback and he had target competition. That wouldn't have necessarily been good for him. So I don't think this makes Adams worth anything more than he was last year, but it's a good run out. It could have been a worse landing spot. The other potential biggest winner, depending on the dominoes that fall, would be JSN, right? Yeah. If they go out and they sign Sam Darnold, and then let's say they add a wide receiver in the draft that they want to take the top off the defense, And then now it's just about scheming this whole passing game around JSN and moving him all over the formation and things like that. I think JSN could end up like when we look back at this after the NFL draft, at that point, we could look back and be like, whoa, like JSN was actually the biggest winner of that first weekend of free agency.
The worst fit for the Seahawks for you, would that be Justin Fields?
Yeah, and look,
Okay.
I'm with you. I like Justin Fields, and I still feel like, with
do
the right
too.
coordinator, and Kubiak is one that I think could get something out of Fields. It does just worry you for the pass catchers and just the overall complexion of the offense, because they're going to be willing to run the ball a lot. Well, Kubiak's already shown he's willing to do that. So those are the challenges that come with Justin Fields. It's not that the Seahawks might not be able to find a winning formula with him. It's just for fantasy football, we know we're not going to get a situation where he throws for 4,500 yards, right? And JSN gets, to go off for like 1,310 touchdowns. That's not happening, most likely, with Justin Fields. It could happen with Darnold.
Hypothetically, since we're right here and I've got you and we're just hanging out on a Sunday, Aaron Rodgers to the Seahawks, how bad or good or net neutral would that be?
I think that's basically, I think it's neutral pretty much to what you have with Geno. And look, I like Geno. I think Geno is actually a good quarterback. I think people bag on Geno a little bit. I don't think they realize how good he's been over the last few years. I don't think he's he's not a top 10, top 12 quarterback probably in the league, but I think he potentially is in that 15 to 18 range. So I think that he was already doing what we hoped Sam Darnold would do last year, and then Darnold did it, right? So I feel like they're kind of in a similar tier together. These are guys that were former early picks. Obviously, Darnold was much higher. Geno was an early second-round pick. These are guys that were, pretty highly allotted draft picks coming out. Had to take a little bit of a stint away from being the starting quarterback for an NFL team, come back. Both of them, turn it around after taking some time to, sit on the bench a little bit and learn some more about football. But I think it's pretty even if it is Aaron Rodgers. Rodgers is not what he once was, but I still think he could be QB 15 to 20, and that could be enough to really feed JSN.
All right. Someone said in the chat, Jameis Winston to the Seahawks. Let's just have fun.
Well, Jameis needs somebody to throw the ball down the field to. Who is that right now on the Seahawks?
What they're doing.
Is that Jake Bobo?
I don't know what they're doing, but let's just have fun, Dwayne. Let's just do it. Appreciate, as always, everyone hanging out with us. You guys are the absolute best. Have to remind you, go to fantasylife.com. You've got the running back rookie supermodel. Dwayne, it's like Christmas all over again. So you've got the supermodel live at fantasylife.com. Everything that you need to know for the NFL draft as well is over there. And same with our newsletter in your inbox, 100% free. So make sure you head on over there, fantasylife.com, and we'll see you next.